Dude, what is that? That wasn't you, right?
No, that was not
that?
me. What the is that? I don't know.
Holy we came to the right building. To our left, down the hallway with all these rooms, the doors were all open. We heard like this dragging, sliding kind of sound, and it wasn't far from us. And it startled me. It really did scare me. Hello?
What was that? That sounded like something sliding towards us.
Yeah, it totally did. Who's here?
What was it?
I don't know. It sounded like something was dragging.
Yeah, it sounded like a sliding.
That scared me a little bit.
That scared me.
After Amy and I tried to find the source of the dragging sound, we figured it'd be a good place to set up and do some EVP work. Who's here with us?
We heard you moving some stuff around, and it's very exciting to us that you can do that. Can you do that some more? Any footsteps?
Can you please just move one of these doors again? One more time.
We kind of settled down and we were quiet. We kept hearing noises.
Yeah. What was that? Was that another door?
What door was that?
I don't know. Who's there?
Welcome to another broadcast of Honor with Tony Sweet, Truth Be Told, where we believe an experience becomes truth. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and I'm here with my co-host, world-renowned psychic Eddie Connor, and our very special co-host, Damona Hoffman. Thank you for supporting our sponsors by going to ConsciousLifeExpo.com to get your tickets for the 2015 event.
And take your mind on a literary journey by traveling over to AdventuresUnlimitedPress.com to purchase many of the books from our experts featured right here on Truth Be Told. I'm Eddie Connor, and today our guest expert is Kris Williams. Kris is a genealogy contributor to Ancestry.com, a former historical researcher and investigator of the Sci-Fi Channel show Ghost Hunters, as well as a former co-lead investigator of Ghost Hunters International.
And Eddie, this makes me so excited! I love the combination of ancestry research and paranormal. I'm in heaven.
I know you are. Well, Tony, let's not wait any longer. Please welcome to Truth Be Told, Kris Williams.
I'm so excited to have you on the show. Oh my gosh, I hope you enjoyed that opening for yourself.
Oh, I did. It was amazing.
Well, I want to introduce the panelist of co-hosts today. We have the psychic extraordinaire, world-renowned psychic, and a top model. We have Eddie Connor in the house.
Thank you. I like how you did ladies first.
I know, but we want to save our special guest for the last.
Behind door number 2.
Yes, the one and only former sci-fi. What were you? The producer?
Executive.
What were you?
You
should have asked me. I would have told you.
And she's also has a show here on UBN Radio called
Dates and Mates every Wednesday at 11 a.m.
Damona Hoffman is in the house. Woo, woo.
I'm going to hop on that chat roll, too, while we're at it.
Yeah, if you're in the chat roll, please join, and we'd love to, if you have any questions for Kris and Chad in the next hour, we would love to ask them for you, and then hopefully they'll answer them, unless it gets too personal. Then we might ask her off the air, just for our own amusement. All right, so Kris, thank you so much for joining us, and this is a pleasure because, like I said, when we add paranormal and historical research, that's my game right there. Right there is my game.
I can tell. You're like all lit up today, Tony.
Yes.
Yeah, you got that.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, he totally has radio announcer nipple erection. He does.
All right, so I don't even know where to begin from there. Let's see, where should we begin? Okay, so Kris, you were on Ghost Hunters as a historical researcher, and you're no longer there. But I want to go back before.
She's still hunting ghosts, though.
I know she is still hunting ghosts, but we want to find out when was that? When did that passion get started? When did it get under your little feetsies and start to looking for those ghosties? Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, it's something my family was always open to the paranormal. My mom grew up in a house that's supposedly active. I say supposedly because my grandparents still live there. I've never had anything happen there to me. But my family had all these stories, and I was just saying, yeah, okay. My dad's side had a ton of stories, just weird things that happened and dreams and just all these, strange things. So I had experiences of my own. They were weird, but I was more of a history person. So, it was one of those things where I was open to it, but I wasn't obsessed with it. And then I became obsessed with genealogy, and I became obsessed with history, and I loved visiting old locations. And I met Jane Grant from Ghost Hunters, I'd say around 2001. And I met them through a mutual friend, and when they told me what they did, I was like, are these guys crazy? Because who the heck looks for this stuff? This is weird. So I met them. We completely hit it off. The two of them became like brothers to me, really. And then a few years later, they got the show, Ghost Hunters. They asked me to join a few times. I was like, no, I'm good. I don't want to do reality. I don't want to do TV. Thanks, guys. But I kept passing. And in 2006, we ended up having 5 friends and family members pass away. And I really hadn't dealt with death since I was 4, I would say. So it was quite a year. It was quite a blow. And, at that point I kind of realized I had 2 different beliefs that completely contradicted each other. On one hand, I was open to the idea of the paranormal and enjoyed telling the stories of my parents. On the other hand, when I looked at death, I just believed, I don't remember not being born, so why is it any different? We just end. So when I lost all those people, I was like, okay, I've got these 2 beliefs. They completely contradict each other. What is going on? I've lost so many people at this point, I need to know. So when Jane Grant asked me the last time, it was more of a personal, I need to do this, rather than, before where I was just kind of like, I don't know, kind of weird. So it was a strange, by chance type of thing.
What do you? Because we talked about this before with a ghost hunter about the importance of finding out the history of the entities and the location of where many paranormal activities are at. When did you tie that in your own research, in your own mind, with it? You realize that this is so important to actually do the research of the location?
Well, I'm still a huge skeptic. I'm still not sure if I believe what we're experiencing is actually people's past. But since that's, one of the theories, if I'm always looking for proof. And I think that's the thing with genealogy is in order to follow your family line, you need to back that up with records. So for me, it was more or less, okay, we're going into this location, and there's stories about this guy named Joe who passed away. Was there somebody named Joe that ever lived in this house? They say a soldier lived here and died here. Was there ever a battle that was fought on the land? So for me, it was more or less trying to make sense of the stories with facts, which is something that I actually really enjoyed doing.
And I know for me, I started doing ancestry work almost 25, 30 years ago now with my uncle. And, I always ask questions with my grandparents about the family history. Who was that influenced you when you was interested in doing ancestry work?
It's kind of a combination of things. My dad's always been a history nut, and he's kind of, he was the reason I was always interested in history, even from a young age. But then I had a teacher in the 4th grade, Mrs. Drosher, who became addicted to genealogy herself. She'd just gotten into it. She loved it. And then she decided, okay, I'm going to give my 4th graders this assignment of doing their own family tree. So she gave us 2 weeks, and I think she expected us to just come in like grandparents, maybe great-grandparents.
Right.
I went nuts. My grandmother told me this one story of this woman we descend from who was hanged on the Boston Common in the 1660s. So, there's all this talk about her being a witch, and, she was a Quaker, and they kept kicking her out of Boston, and they finally ended up hanging her. So there's statues of her, and, I hear all these stories as, I think I was 11 at the time. It completely just caught my attention. And at that point, I became hooked because I wanted to know exactly how we came, down from her. But
I find it fascinating too. And this is just a side note. I mean, even Eddie, I did Eddie's tree, and we found out that he is. Was it your uncle? Like an uncle that was a judge in
one of my grandpas.
Yeah, in Lynchburg, Virginia, is named after his family, and lynching was.
The term lynching
came from his uncle, who was.
Yeah,
the lynch
crazy?
law.
I know.
Congrats to you.
Wow.
I know.
So you're welcome, North America.
Still a popular guy, I'm sure.
I'm
know, right?
sure, yeah. Don't invite him to the party.
Right.
But I will say, as an African American person, it is it's kind of challenging. And my mom's sort of been working on this, but you get a couple generations back and things just get a little bit fuzzy, and it's really hard to track down. And who knows, I have family members on the white side that can go, way back to the old country, but we get a little bit stuck in the African-American dilemma in the United States.
Yeah.
How do you get around that?
I don't have a lot of experience there.
You've never
but
been African-American?
I dealt with, my ex was Native, he's part Native, and that's horrible to trace as well, because, it's sad, because you hear the stories of, Natives being big into, respecting their ancestors and honoring them and all this stuff. And our country was horrible with destroying their records. And any records they did have, they would destroy them intentionally. And it's just a sad and evil thing to do. So, I remember working with him trying to figure out some of his ancestry as well. And it was just, I've never hit so many roadblocks in my life. So it gets tough. It really does get tough. And that's the thing, too, is everybody who's been into it, they're going to have different experiences because, everybody's family is different.
Oh, yes.
But I know that is definitely a challenge.
Well, I want to ask you, in your research of your own family, what was one of your biggest surprises? I always find that fascinating.
Biggest surprises? Well, the Mary Dyer, the Quaker who's hanged, was the first big surprise that got me hooked. But then there was another surprise, and it's funny because it ties into the ghost hunting. I had this really weird experience at a graveyard looking for one of my great-grandfathers. And it was one of those weird things where, I went to this old cemetery to find his headstone. And my ex was with me, so he was way on the other end of this graveyard, and it was an old cemetery. And I walked we both started on either end, and we were going to meet in the middle until we found the right headstone. And I would walk and stop, and I'd hear like 4 or 5 footsteps behind me in the grass.
Oh,
and I turn around in mid-sentence thinking he's there, and he's all the way up the cemetery. So it happened a few times. And then when we were going to go to the back portion of the cemetery, I just stopped. He crossed over this little road that cut it in half, and he was going up the right side of it. And clear as day, I heard footsteps come out from around behind me and walk down past in front of me to the left. And I called up to him like, they're not up there. And, of course, he looked at me like I was nuts. But I followed where I heard the footsteps go, and sure enough, there's the headstone. The crazy thing is, years later, here I am working for Ancestry.com, and I do a video that included a picture of that headstone. Well, somebody else who descended from him reached out to me, and they're like, hey, just so you know, James P. Osgood used to be Robert Robbins. And I was like, okay. And apparently he was married to another woman, and they had 2 sons. And there was this other woman, Mary Belinda Luce, who's married to another man, and they had a son. And Mary and Robert Robbins ran off together to Canada. They had my second great-grandmother. Then they moved down to Vermont under a new name, and they changed the kids' names and everything.
Wow.
Except for that.
People
That's a
did
story.
some shady things back in the day,
I
right?
know. They did.
That is like TMZ level.
I know.
Right?
But it makes you wonder, back then when technology wasn't the way it is now, obviously, why you would feel the need to change the names and change the babies' names the whole 9 yards, because it wasn't that easy to track.
Yeah, it's not like you can
But
look it up on the
that
Google.
was serious.
Wow.
Yeah, and you can't even find record of them ever marrying either. So that's another question. Like don't know if they ever married, but they took their kids and left their spouses and just.
That see, I love that stuff, and I mean I really
that
do.
whole taking of children.
No, I
moving to
love that.
another
I just
country.
love finding, even, good or bad. I
Moving
love
back.
finding out that information about your family. That you've he was a great man, and then you find out that he was like a chicken thief or something.
Chicken thief.
It's just funny because one story can lead to like a whole different story. So, well, I know, right? You said. But I remember when my grandfather used to tell me certain things. He told me that we were related to Davy Crockett, and I ended up finding out how I was connected to. He was a cousin of us. Yeah. And
Okay.
I just find this stuff fascinating. So when you were doing your family research, or when you have done research for other people, and do you do that as a side job too? Is work for?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been doing that for a few people. It's funny how many people want the information, but they don't either have the time or the patience.
Right.
To do it.
Yeah, they want it. Yeah, I get that all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, but I find it fascinating. I don't even
I
charge.
love it.
I don't know. But when you do find information about somebody's past, especially when it's something when you're dealing with the ghost hunting, how do you tie that in to find out if that is a legit reason that this is probably a ghost or not a ghost when you're on location? If you find out, let's say there was a soldier by the name of Bob that got, decapitated in a certain location, that still does not mean it's Bob.
No, it doesn't.
So is that when you do find information about a location, how do you try to tie it as close together, or what do you look for to tie it that it is that ghost, or it might be that ghost?
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes you just find that people have the stories wrong. Like, they'll say something took place in a certain home that they believe is haunted, and really that whatever that event was took place 2 streets over. A lot of it's just making sure, one, that the history of that location is correct. The other thing is trying to find evidence in the research that connects or backs up the evidence that you'd actually catch, as far as paranormal activity goes. So maybe there's a name that comes over on an EVP, or a date that comes over on it, or, some sort of line. Like, I know we're at Fort Mifflin, and one of the things that it said was dig it deeper, and the case made 11. And afterwards, when we played this for the people that ran it, they're like, "Oh yeah, well, at one time they were, trying to dig that section deeper because they were really trying to make this whole. It was like, it was solitary confinement. So they said that it was something that would have or could have been said by one of the workers who were hired or forced to dig the section out. This is trying to find, like, everything has to connect. It's just like when we go out on investigations, people would always be like, "Oh, well, what piece of equipment do you like to use?" There's certain pieces that I enjoy using, that I trust, I guess is the word, to some degree. But I don't like using one piece of equipment because it's just not enough. So I might use several different pieces, and, history and research is just another, tool in your bag of things to try to make sense of what's going on. So can you 100% say what you find in your research proves what happened there? No, but it's another thing that might make everything
add to it,
or help make everything make sense. It's weird.
Yeah, Kris.
It's weird.
Kris, out of all of the places you've been to as a ghost hunter, and when you weren't on camera or even off camera, whichever, what is the quote creepiest place you've ever been to that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up? And don't say Bojangles.
There's been so many, but for different reasons. I mean, sometimes it's not even a paranormal thing; it's just the history alone.
Yeah.
Paranormal-wise, one of the strangest places I've been to is Waverly Hills, in Kentucky.
Oh, I thought you
Very
said.
strange
I thought you
place.
said Beverly Hills.
It's strange for a different reason.
Yeah, I was
Rodeo
like, okay.
Drive, yeah.
Very, very weird place. You know, and then on a history end, I know that when we went to Europe. Exactly. We're in Germany. We went to Dachau while we were there, so one of the old concentration camps. So there's different levels of creepy. To me, real life is creepy. The paranormal stuff it has startled me. I've never I don't know. I've never been to the point where I was so scared where I felt like I had to leave a place. But yeah, I don't know. I think that stuff that we know 100% had happened in the past, that's the spirit scares me way more than the paranormal does. It always has. I'm not really sure why.
And weird question. A lot of people, whenever they go to a place like Waverly Place or other mental institutions and that sort of thing, when they go to the children's wards, they get more kind of creeped out than they seem to do when they go to the other parts where the adults were, or the all women or the all men. You know what I mean? And I find that the children's spirits or ghosts, if you will, have a tendency to be a little bit more playful or mischievous. Do you find the same thing, Kris?
I don't know if it's a matter of them being more playful or mischievous, or if it's us not being okay with the fact. You know, I don't think anybody likes the idea of a kid dying in general, never mind in a horrible place. So I'm not sure if it's an us or them type of situation. Are we the ones making it worse because we don't like the idea of kids dying, or is there something more to it as far as, like you said, they play up more, which could be the case as well too. Kind of hard to say.
Well, we have a game that we do here on Truth Be Told with Tony Sweet, and it's called Who Said This? So I'm going to read you a quote, and you tell me who said it, okay? So, ghosts don't scare me, and I'd be thrilled if one walked up to me and introduced herself. It's the living that are way scarier than the dead. Do you know who said that?
I would say.
That is absolutely a Kris Williams quote right off your website.
I was going to say, I'm like, that sounds like me. I finally got shirts made up that said, ghosts don't scare me, people do. They're great.
Yeah.
So many comments for that. Yeah.
Yeah,
they do. The living scare the hell out of me.
Yep, me too.
I'm a huge true crime reader. So, you know, all growing up, I'd read about all these crazy people. So that's what scares the heck out of me. The paranormal stuff is just, it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's weird. I don't understand it. I've had, you know, a handful of experiences that I still absolutely cannot wrap my head around. But as far as scary, I think people can be scary.
Yeah.
Living can be scary.
Absolutely. And did you see the movie Gone Girl or read the book yet?
I haven't.
Oh my God! Speaking of scary people, yeah, you should check that out for real. Yeah, talk about psychological and schizophrenia and all this other sociopathic stuff. Oh, child, okay.
Well, I'm going to ask this to both you and Damona, because Damona had worked on Ghost Hunters. That there's a lot of skeptical people out there that say this is fake, this is not real. And I know you said you've been a skeptic yourself. So when people do ask you that question, is it real? What do you say, both of you? What do you say to them? And
I'm gonna let Kris answer first.
Okay, yeah, Kris, you answer first.
She's in the field, in the
I
trenches.
always say I don't know. That's why I'm still doing it. I mean, have I had odd experiences? Yes, I have. But like I said, it's more a handful that I will actually swear to being strange. But I'm also under the belief that, you know, maybe our science hasn't caught up to whatever this is, and maybe it's perfectly normal and rational and explainable. We're just not there yet. Mm-hmm. And then there's the other part of me that's always believed that as humans, we cannot deal with not having answers. Mm-hmm. So we like to build up these stories around things when we can explain something. So am I sold on, you know, these experiences being from people who've passed and are trying to contact us? I don't know. I don't know if I 100% buy into that yet. But I will say I've had some really strange experiences. Still can't figure it out, and that's why I'm still into it. I'm just into it on my own terms now, because TV was a little crazy, which I think Damona can back me up on.
Yeah,
The schedule is nuts.
I was going to say it's a pretty demanding schedule, but you know, from the network perspective, I would say that authenticity was always paramount to us, and so it really didn't matter what evidence they found. And if you really look at the shows, ultimately there's not a ton of evidence considering the the amount of time that they're spending, and that's really what made Ghost Hunters. I mean, it's what, in its 10th season now. That's what made Ghost Hunters so successful, because we don't have to fake stuff and make things up.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name some other shows, but we don't have to.
I know 90% of them. Just say that.
Yeah, because it's really more about the anticipation. If you watch the show, it's really that sitting in the dark, waiting. What was that? And then it turns out to be a cat. So when you really look at the volume of time that's spent, and to condense it all into an hour, I mean, that's like hours and hours of Kris sitting in the dark, just waiting for something. Waiting for something, reacting to like whatever's happening, just to maybe get one EVP or one little, one little scare of being startled, because we're making a show about anticipation. And then when we do find that evidence, I think it makes it that much more real and makes people want to come back for more.
Right.
Well, and Damona and Kris, was it Ghost Hunters where they went to, was it Alcatraz? Or a penitentiary where literally they turned the camera and there was this apparition that looked...
I think you're thinking of Eastern State
Yes.
Penitentiary.
And you see this thing literally darting away from them that looked like a whisper. And then they were kind of like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, did y'all see it, bitch?
Well, I will tell you, actually. So I still work with Rob Katz, who is the executive producer of Ghost Hunters for many seasons. And he said the one place, he too is a skeptic.
Yeah.
And he said, but the one place, Eastern State.
Yeah.
He told me he saw that thing that they caught. He saw it live in person.
I would have died.
And I was like, so you saw a ghost? It's haunted. Don't you believe? And he's just like, but he's a
Well,
skeptic. So he's like,
yeah.
I don't know what it was. And I think that it's also that skepticism, I think, that made the show work.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is that it's Steve I look up to hugely as an investigator, and the thing that I learned from him is the harder you are on the evidence, the better it is. And, for me going into it as a skeptic to begin with, I loved him for it, because I'd bring him stuff, he'd rip it apart. And at first it's like, nothing I bring is good enough. And after a while, I'm like, I like this, because he's not going easy on anything. So when he does let something through, it made me think about it a little bit more, or a little harder, because he thought it was something worth bringing through to Jason and Grant, or worth bringing through to a client.
I actually asked him one time.
He felt more credible.
I asked him one time at one of the live shows, I'm like, can I review the evidence with you? He was like, it's okay. I'll help you out. I know you have a lot to do. He's like, that's
it's funny.
okay.
He wouldn't let me touch any of the evidence. In the first year, he wouldn't let me review anything. He's like, nope. I'm like, when are you going to trust me to do this? I can't imagine it's that hard. Nope.
Well, that's what I was surprised by when I started working on the show. I assumed with the magic of television, you guys shot it and then it went off to some audio guy and then they spit it back out. And then when I was like, wait a minute, Steve really goes through all of this evidence himself?
I love that.
That's
and then
great.
gets up the next day and, shoots or does another investigation. Wow, that's real dedication
all of us would
to
go
this.
through it. What they do is they split it between all of us. And, I remember times where each one of us had 20 hours worth to go through video and audio. And Amy and I would be done. We'd bring our stuff to Steve and Tango, and then they go through just the stuff that we noted. So it was going through several filters, basically several layers. So by the time stuff got to Jay and Grant, and by the time they even killed stuff, like the client was getting maybe 2-3 things if they were lucky. But it was it's a credibility thing. You don't want to be sending crap through.
Absolutely.
Everybody goes through it.
Well, and I have a question, especially for Damona and you, Kris, and that is, I think you're both healthy skeptics, right?
Not me. I'm like, that's a ghost. That's a ghost.
Well, see, I'm the same way. See, I am skeptical, which is why I think it makes me a better psychic. And so I just don't tune into somebody and go, oh, that's your dead grandma child. Just eat a cookie. She'll say, hey. I'm not that person. I like proof. I like the proof that a person in spirit will give the person sitting in front of me that no one can know but that person. That's what I live for. And that to me eliminates a lot of my skepticism. So my question for you two ladies is this. Okay. It is. So, Kris, let's pretend you're at the East Penitentiary.
Eastern State.
That you're in the bowels of hell. And let's say you're sitting there all night long and you look over and this dead thing comes up to you and literally, let's say, introduces themselves or pokes at you just a little bit, not to terrorize you, but it's real. And we can see in the footage that your blouse comes out where they pulled your blouse. But we can't see it on camera. So my question to you, with an experience like that, do you believe more then than you ever did before? And then as a healthy skeptic, and for the television audience, how do you relay that message to your audience?
I'm the type of person that would have it happen and then I'd be like, I don't know. What did I miss? I'm so horrible with it. I don't know how to explain that, though. It's hard. And I think that's the thing that's so tricky with the paranormal is I've had people ask me, do you watch any of the paranormal shows? I was like, oh, yeah, I used to watch this, that, and, I used to watch Haunting. And they're like, well, why would you watch a Haunting? I was like, well, it's creepy, and I enjoyed the story. And they're like, yeah, but they're not investigators. They're like, it's just people who own homes. I was like, yeah, but at the end of the day, when you watch Ghost Hunters, you're trusting me as an investigator. You're trusting my story. You're not experiencing what I'm experiencing, but you're trusting me as a person to tell you the truth.
Yes.
So I really didn't see a haunting as any different in some ways. They may not have been investigators, but they lived in homes where they had apparently a lot of activity, some of them. But you're still taking somebody's word at the end of the day. So, I mean, I could have a crazy in-my-face type of experience, to the point where I'm 100% a believer, but I don't think there's any way to completely turn an audience. They're either going to believe you or they aren't. And since they're not there to experience it with you, I would hope that they'd question me, and I would hope that they would doubt me, and I would hope that they'd think. Because I've never been offended by somebody coming up to me and be like, oh, did you check this, that, and the other thing? Because sometimes it does take another pair of eyes. Sometimes you do miss something. Sometimes people have a similar experience and they were able to explain it. So I don't think you can ever fully win somebody else over unless they're there to experience it with you.
Which is why Tony loves doing this show. His philosophy is whenever you have an experience like that, then you become a believer. So your truth changes. And I think in a way you and Damona are saying the same thing. It comes back down to authenticity. It comes down to the person you're across from and the experience they had. And if you read that as sincere, then it helps you expand your belief systems. Yet at the same time, you're kind of like, let me shake it off, like Taylor Swift, shake it off. And then go back in there and look for something. You know what I mean?
Damona, have you ever had anything happen, either with the Ghost Hunters or just on your own?
No.
I'm turning this
I
interview
did-
around.
I know, right? Good for you.
I had a number of experiences when I was a kid, but I did have one experience with ghost hunters at the Stanley Hotel.
Oh.
And I was in a room with Jason and Grant, and they had they were. I'm like, what is the equipment called? It's so long. But no, they had a K2 meter. Thank you. Okay, I got a message from Spirit there, Eddie.
The spirit told her.
So I'm like standing against the door in this room, and I didn't know. Like I knew Stanley Hotel. I'd seen it on the show. Because I came into the show like at the end of season 3, beginning of season 4, and so I'd seen the Stanley. I was so excited to be there, and I'm just standing against the door, and I felt like a brush on my shoulder, and I didn't know anything about the room I was in. And then the K2 meter starts going off, and they're asking questions, and it's seemingly responding. And then we're in the dark, like no one saw me kind of get the shivers. And then Jason says, they were taking different groups in at a time. So he said in the previous group, there was a woman who was standing by the closet. She actually had to leave because she felt somebody touch her neck. Ooh. And I didn't know that. And I was like, oh my God, that is what I experienced. But nobody saw me, and there was no camera on me. I mean, we were just doing this for it was actually like a live event. And that made me shiver even more. So the story behind it was there was a guy, you probably know this story, Kris, but there was a guy who used to like hang out in the closet and spy on women in the hotel room.
Oh, back in the day.
Eddie.
Back in the day.
She said spy on women.
Oh,
that would
right,
be why
right,
people
sorry.
are creepy.
Yeah.
He was a cross-dressing.
Oh,
But isn't this the same Red Rum hotel?
It was the one that inspired The Shining.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Stephen King.
That's even
was inspired
scarier.
by.
That was the first.
But it's not where they filmed it or anything.
Right,
Just what inspired the fictional.
I think they filmed it in the miniseries they did.
The miniseries they did, yes, and they have lots of photos to prove that. Actually, that was one of the creepiest thing I saw in the Kubrick exhibit that was out here that was touring around. It was like all the stuff from The Shining, and like the twins and their dresses were there.
Oh,
I was like,
no.
oh, golly. And I did have a weird thing happen in my hotel room. Like our phone went off just randomly.
That stuff.
Was that a thing?
Oh
Eddie?
yeah, that was a thing.
And I was like, but I'm not. I told them because I'm such a sissy about all this. Like I'm like, do not put me in the haunted room. Like put them in the haunted room. Put me like as far from the hauntings as possible.
See, I'm like Kris. I want him to just walk up to me and say, "Hey, how you doing?"
But not while I'm sleeping. Like I want to get my rest. That was always the freakiest
I
thing.
would love that.
And then Kris, you were on Ghost Hunters International too, and a lot of those places.
The
They have
catacombs.
such and
overseas,
such history.
Europe. That's
And you're sleeping in an old castle from like the 1500s.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
fun.
some places we went to, it's like I said, either while we were working or on our downtime. This is stuff that I read about in history books when I was in school. So I'd be walking through the halls of some of these places. It was pretty hard to wrap my head around. It was pretty wild.
So if you could do your own show, and if you walked in, you pitched it right now, girlfriend Kris of All That Is Williams, okay? If you went into a network right now, in one sentence or two, what type of show would you want to bring to the public to help broaden our perspective?
Well, I'm already kind of working on that.
Oh!
Yeah, I can't get into it too much, but I'll
Okay.
say definitely more history-based.
Well, is it one show or two that you're playing with?
One right now.
I think there's going to be two.
You think there's two?
I think there's going to be two.
Kind of two.
That's because it looks like they're going to fold into each other, right?
Well, they'd be two separate things.
Okay,
But-
it's all good. It's
Yeah.
coming. It's coming.
Well, before our time gets away, I want to ask a little more about the ancestry work.
It's always about Tony.
Yeah, it is. Here she goes. So I want to know to give advice to the people out there, because I know, like we said, there's a lot of people that want to know their history, the family history.
Yeah.
What is, other than going to ancestry.com, what do you suggest for people to get started doing their own family tree?
Great question.
Well, usually people are like, oh, how do I get started? And the first thing that I say is you need to start with the living. That's the biggest thing that I learned as a kid. The great thing about genealogy is I would sit with my grandparents and I'd ask them questions about them as a kid and their parents and what their parents were like and their favorite songs, favorite books. Did they serve in the military? Did they not serve? What type of jobs did they have? And there's a lot of things that I learned from my grandparents where, I think you see your parents, you see your grandparents, and you see the titles, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa.
Mm-hmm.
You forget that they were crazy teenagers doing crazy stuff.
Right.
And, with my grandmother, it was funny because I remember I was going through a rough time with dating. And I was just like, how the hell did you get grandpa? He's amazing. Like, this is obnoxious. What is wrong with me? How did I keep getting these losers? And then she's like, oh, I was engaged twice before your grandfather. I was like, what? So she starts telling me all this stuff, and I was like, how the heck did this happen? She's like, a girl has a right to change her mind. I was like, okay.
Oh, Grandma told you.
So it was just nice to feel, I'm like, okay, she gets it. She understands it. She found Grandpa. He's amazing. I'll get there. Or it's just they're talking about living through the Depression or, World War One. Well, not World War One. Well, actually, she had stories from my grandparents about World War One, but mainly World War Two and what that was like. You just realize that you have it a lot easier today than they did, but at the same time, the experiences and the emotions and all that are the same. So I learned a lot about life through them. And it just made me look at things a lot differently. But at the same time, when my grandfather passed in 2006, it wasn't like, oh, I wish I talked to him more. Oh, I wish I asked more questions. I asked him questions. Of course, there's always more things I probably wish I could have.
Right.
But I don't feel like I would have had the regrets I would have if I hadn't gotten into genealogy like I did. I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of him and his life and, just what made him him and what about him is rubbed off on me. So I'd say start with the living, because the thing is once they pass, all you have is records to rely on, and you don't get to fully know a person that way.
And I personally feel that you become closer to your family too. I loved my grandpa. He passed away when I was 12, but I feel closer to him today because I know his dad, his grandparents, his great grandparents. I just feel very close to my grandparents, and my dad and all my family right now, because I feel like I know where they came from. I know what they went through. I know what they had to go through to get to where we are today. So I think it's fascinating and very important that we know where we come from.
And it's so amazing with technology now. With Ancestry.com, my mom brought over my grandfather's birth certificate, and I'm like, this is just so wild. Like, I can actually hold, the original document. And I think also with now, that we can take our MacBooks or our smartphones and we can actually record those people. I think that's really important because that's something that our generation and generations before us didn't really have the ability to do. And going forward, everybody's going to have a video record. It's not just holding
that's right.
Not just holding that little paper, but you can actually see what they were like.
Meanwhile, when Tony was doing some of his ancestry work and tracing things back, and then with mine too, but at one point, Tony, who is the sleuth of Ancestry.com, he knows all of the tricks and the bells and the whistles to sort of maneuver through it. He ended up ordering the
DNA testing.
The DNA tube thing.
Oh, yeah.
And then after that got you further in too.
Well, I found it more fascinating because there are some sides of my family that said, "Oh yeah, we're Native American." This great grandmother was a Cherokee Indian, and I'm like, but I don't find it. I don't see that. I did the DNA testing. Nope, there was none. There was no Native American at all. So I mean,
legend.
Right? But that's what I'm saying. I think it's important because people down the lines they tell a story, and all of a sudden that turns into.
But that don't mean that they weren't playing around with somebody that they weren't supposed to.
No,
and so
if
I do the DNA test, I want some color in my family. We all so white and ginger.
From Lynchburg? I don't know. Yeah. Keep on wishing there, Eddie.
Well, also, I want to ask this before. Like I said, time's going so fast because I find this fascinating. My third great grandfather, Henderson Sweet, born in Kentucky, 1816, Wayne County. Mm-hmm. Okay, when you come to a roadblock, in 1816, and you know that there are people beyond that in America, what do you do? How do you find that information? Because I could tell you later on what I have done, but for somebody that says, oh, and they get frustrated and they quit, I tell people don't quit, because sometimes when you walk away, come back, you'll find it.
Oh, yeah.
But
yes.
what do you do personally if you find a roadblock?
Well, I'm going to sound like an old lady saying this, but back when I first started, there was no internet.
Right.
And I think one of the problems today is people rely too heavily on the internet. It's an amazing tool. There's a lot on there, but not everything's on there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one thing is to, you really have to cross-reference everything you find online. There's a lot of people out there that had either the same name or similar names. There's people that names will carry on over and over, in the family line. That's really confusing. The thing you have to keep in mind, too, is when you're looking up documents, especially census records are notorious for this, they don't always go by their actual full name. They might go by their middle name and their last name, or they might go by initials, or they might go by their nicknames. They have to think of all these different things that they could have been listed as. And when you can't find them that way, sometimes it's good to look for them through their siblings or through their children. And then it's just a matter of, if you get stuck online, knowing where to go off the internet. So sometimes it's a matter of connecting with town halls where you know they were either buried or where they were born. Sometimes it's the state offices, because they're at a certain point where the town offices will keep records, but then they had problems with fires and all this flooding and losing documents.
That's what happened.
So after a certain point, they have to send copies to a state office as well. State offices I don't like using, they take forever to get back to you. So I always try to do the smaller towns or town halls, libraries. There's so many different places to go. I think people get so hung up on the internet. Like I said, it's a good tool, but it's just a matter of figuring out how to find the documents outside of that as well. That'll really kind of open things up for a lot of people. And just reaching out. This is a good thing with Ancestry, is reaching out to other people that descend from the same ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
They're all going to have different stories. They could have documents that you've never seen before. They could have photographs you've never seen before. They could have family heirlooms that came down to your family, and stories connected to those that you've never heard. And sometimes they've been researching much longer than you, and they can give you, 10, 15, 20, 30 more names that you hadn't even had before. It's always good to go through their findings just to make sure everything's correct.
Right.
But it's hugely helpful. There's a bunch of different ways of tackling dead ends.
And I tell people all the time, don't get frustrated, because it can be frustrating, but because my last name is Sweet, Sweet. But back in the day, many people didn't know how to write, especially, and so
especially where are you from?
Where I'm from, baby, Kentucky,
I thought my name was
Kansas.
Triple
I'm
X.
joking.
I know, right?
Okay.
Triple X. But these census takers would come and say, "What's your name?" And they would just say, blah, 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 Eddie Connor. Well, how do you spell it? Well, I don't know. And so you'd say Connor. Well, it's actually Conner. And so that's how a lot of people got their last names incorrect, especially on census. Yeah.
Well, and also Sheila mentioned on the chat roll to go to the point of immigration when your ancestors came. And a lot of us came, my grandfather came here because of religious persecution.
Right.
So my maiden name, Resnick, is not actually our maiden name. It's not actually my maiden name. That's not what their name was. But when you come here and you go through the immigration point and they're like, what's your name? And they just chop it.
Mm-hmm.
Or they don't want to sound Jewish, for example. And they just, they change it to be, to fit in, and then that makes it even more hard to track it because it's a whole different name if you hop across seas.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
My great-grandfather was Italian. He came over in 1909, and the family's name was originally Cautilli. It got changed to Cantelli. I think the U ended up getting switched to an N, probably. But some of the family kept the name as Cantelli. Some of them kept it as Cautilli. And my grandmother was funny because when I started researching her line, I was researching Cantelli. And I was like, I'm getting nowhere. Doing this for like 2 years, nothing but dead ends. And she was upset because I wasn't finding anything. And then all of a sudden she's like, well, her name used to be Cautilli. Does that matter? I wanted to strangle her. I love her.
Doesn't matter.
But I wanted to strangle her.
Cut to, there's a scene of Kris shaking flour off of her grandmother.
I was just like, what is wrong with you? God, why didn't you think that was important? And I don't know.
Oh, that's
crazy.
hysterical.
Well, if somebody does have questions or maybe want to use you as a reference or have you do research
Or hire you.
what can they do to get a hold of you, or what is your suggestion for their next step?
Well, I have a site. It's called keytoyourtree.com, and I do researching for other people. I also teach. I do like online workshops, and
wow.
some people hire me to actually do the research for them. Some people send me questions, and I'll get back to them as soon as I can to help them figure out where to go next with problems they've run into. I have done a bunch of video blogs. I do written blogs on a bunch of different topics. Sometimes it's genealogy and history kind of mixed. Sometimes it's, how-tos with certain things in genealogy, but I'm always up to something.
Yeah, well, good. No, this is I may have to. I have a few blocks, so I may have to give you a call or give you an email saying I need your help. I need to hire you because this one. It's I said of all the sides that I have a block is the sweets, and I'm like, come on, that's my name.
Yeah. I think its block is the Williams side, so I hear you.
Right.
Awesome.
All right. So everybody, you can go to what was that website again?
KeepingYourTree.com.
Or you can go to KrisWilliams.com.
K-R-I-S.
Yeah,
Williams.
K-R-I-S. I'm going to put that up on the screen so people can find it. Also, follow you on Twitter at KrisWilliams81. And you're just a baby. Just a baby.
I'm on there way too much.
No, it's good. That's people want to, because you have a lot of fans. You have a lot of people that love you, and I can see why.
I don't know what I did.
You know what you did? Here's what you did. You're real. You're honest. You're authentic. You literally just put it all out there, and you treat people the way you want to be treated in an industry that forgot how to freaking do that. So that's what you did.
And she's purty too.
And she's purty. She's P-U-R-D-Y,
You got a pretty picture
purty.
with these glowing eyes.
All right. Well, Kris, thank you so much.
Thank you guys. It's fun.
And please come back and join us again. I would love that.
And please,
absolutely, I'm game.
Yeah, and find Tony's grandpa, please.
My third grade grandpa. Thank you.
You know what happened? He ran off with her grandma to Vermont.
Right. and they hyphenated.
There
Sweet
you go.
Dash Williams. All right.
Thanks, Kris.
We'll talk to you soon. All right. Bye-bye.
Sounds good. Thank you guys. Bye.